Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
So good to be here. Thank you for inviting me, WCPT, and thank you for listening. And thank you, Alex, for being there at the controls, and Julia, and all the people who make it possible for us to be together today, which, for those who celebrate, is the eve of Christmas. It's funny. I think those of us who don't have Christmas, we're almost more into I don't want to generalize, but I feel like when someone is celebrating Christmas, I always wonder, is it the religious aspect? Is it the social aspect? I love going with friends and love to church on the Catholic High Mass at Christmas. That's the beautiful midnight mass. Gorgeous, fun. The music, always so beautiful. So to those of you who celebrate, Merry or blessed Christmas, and to those who have just fun with family, do the decorating, merry. And for those of us who don't, let's be happy for our friends' joy. That's always a pleasure. And light in the darkness is always a powerful thing. And that's about as cheerful as I can be, given what's going on in Chicago right now. Holy smokes. And I don't mean that in the religious sense. The mayor of Chicago seems to be just sort of going down for the third time. Even his friends, and I was never one of them, even his friends are disappointed, and I believe that I shouldn't generalize to say all of them, but quotes from several of his supporters in his party on the city council have made lovely, eloquent speeches, which can be condensed to, what the bleep, man? That's pretty much what's going on. The school board, a shambles. People on the board, appointed by him, sacked a perfectly reasonable school board head, all because he wouldn't do that thing like your dog when it rolls over and shows you its belly to show that you can do whatever you want to it. You ever seen a dog do that if you're not a dog owner? When the dog is completely submissive and it just rolls over, puts its paws in the air, goes, yes, just pet my belly, just do whatever you want. That's kind of Brandon Johnson with the teachers. And it's not that I don't love and respect teachers. On the other hand, if you were the mayor and you'd gotten there because you'd been placed there like the angel on a Christmas tree by the Chicago teachers, what would you admit that you were in over your little head? So I thought I would ask you, have you ever been in a job where you just realized at some point you were over your head? And what did you do? Have you ever taken a job where you thought, yeah, I can totally handle this, and about a day or two in, you're like, oh boy, I don't know if I can manage this. What does one do when you are in over your head? Because sitting here, I think it's pretty obvious to those of us who live in Chicago, have sent or will send kids to school in Chicago, and the suburban folk, you need to be concerned about this too, because if Chicago goes down, it's not good for anybody's economy. I mean, look at the city of Oakland. They just cut some huge billions of dollars out of their budget, and the residents of the city are like, you can't do that. We need these things. We're already at the bone. So what do you do if you are in over your head? I will share with you that there have been a couple of times in my life when I've been in over my head. Fortunately, nobody's well-being, the education of the children of the city did not hinge upon my making a correct decision. The joke amongst radio people is, well, it's not brain surgery. Thank goodness for that. I used to joke that I've never taken a job where I totally knew what I was doing ahead of time. But sometimes you really, really, really get in over your head. What do you do? In my case, sometimes I ask for help. It depends on the job. The last job I got into that I was really, I had some skills, but I will tell you the truth. I worked for a big financial radio, news gathering, TV producing organization. And I was recommended by a friend who had worked with me in other capacities. And I wanted this job that was off the air so that I could finish the book, which, by the way, is my book. Yes. If you can spell my name. Yes, that is my book. Turi Ryder's She Said What a Life on the Air. And I wanted to finish it. I wanted a job that would just keep bills paid, keep me busy, keep my name in. And my friend recommended me for this job. There was a job that I had worked around the people who did it, but I'd never done it myself. And it involved learning software, and it involved learning editing, and it involved trying to figure out what they wanted for their station, or stations. And I had no idea. I bought a new computer. I didn't know how to use that. I bought some software. I had no idea how to use that. And there they are waiting for their produced for, it was something called, I was working for the station producing the stations you hear for the station about itself. So like when you hear the little ads for Joan's show, which is the show that normally is here, Joan Esposito's show, and you hear the pieces of people talking to Joan or how great she is. That's the kind of thing I was doing for this organization, except I had no idea how to do it at all. And I called up a friend of mine to ask for help. And I went, now a thing you can do, you can go online and look up how to do stuff. I've seen repair people looking up how to do stuff. Well, good for them if they know how to get. You don't want your surgeon looking up how to do stuff. When you're in over your head, that's, for me, I have no problem asking for help. I think Brandon Johnson has a big problem asking for help. And when he gets help, when he's offered help, he didn't take it. He didn't listen. Oh, Robert, he thinks that I should not be doing this. Robert, welcome. You're on WCPT. Good to speak with you. You have a little bone to pick?
Yeah, I had to check the dial if I was listening to WCPT or IND or 560 or one of those other right-wing stations. I mean, do you really think that Brendan Johnson is so terrible that you need to go after him like he's Antichrist or something?
Well, let's talk about that. Where is it written?
Okay.
Where is it written that I, a Democrat, a solid, hardcore, Biden-loving Democrat, have to be in lockstep? Well, yeah, there's a lot we agree on. Even so, we have the beauty of our party is that we have a diverse philosophy about how to get things done, right? But unfortunately,
that's one of the things,
right? Mm-hmm. That's one of them. But unfortunately, the reality of running a big city is that you only get so much money to play with. And Chicago, to be fair to the mayor, Chicago's been digging itself into a terrible position with pensions for a long time. So that's not just on the mayor. On the other hand, a real leader, has to be able to stand up and say some hard decisions need to be made. And even though we love our teachers, and I'm speaking to you as a parent of 2 Lane Tech graduates, so I know a little bit about, a kid on the LSC. It's not that I don't love our teachers. I was out there walking a picket line with them last time they were out on strike. Nevertheless, it doesn't matter if somebody talks a good game if they're not executing the program, if they're not being fiscally responsible, if they run on a platform, for example, of no new real estate taxes, and then all of a sudden here are these billions of dollars of real estate taxes and not equally distributed, I might add, and punishing people who are creating businesses in the city, businesses, small businesses where people work, and somebody somebody, if you care about your party, which I'm assuming you do, and I know I do, someone has to stand up and say, no, you're going about this in a really bad way. And I was very supportive of certain other candidates for mayor, and I always felt that the mayor was not the best candidate because he wasn't really experienced or qualified, and also because I'm a union member. I love my union, but there needs to be pushback. That's what negotiations are all about. Negotiations are about, this is what we want, and this is what you want, and we need to work it out. But that's not how he's doing it.
Okay. Because I'm wondering if you let me on so you can hear what I think, or
I'm listening. I'm listening.
Just to continue your soliloquy.
Well, okay. Wait a minute. Wait, if you want to just,
it's hard to respond to like eight or 10 points that you brought up.
Well, go
but
for
I would
it.
Say one. Okay, fine. Lifelong Democrat, lifelong Chicago resident. By the way, I don't live that far from Lane High School, and I'll tell you this. I'm glad that when I called in, now you said a few things that were, in fact, conciliatory to the mayor, saying, well, true that he didn't create that, did he? He hasn't even been mayor 2 years yet. You were talking about him as if he was the worst mayor that ever led a city in history. And I just wonder about that. And I am curious. You said you supported a different, and I appreciate that you bring up that you supported a different candidate in the last election. So just for in terms of transparency, what candidate did you support?
The older woman. Why is it not coming to me? I want to say King. I'm terrible with names. I would look it up. She had the best program. I thought that was in the primary. And the actual. That sounds right.
Yeah. So you supported someone else.
Yeah.
So good that you mentioned that too. I'm mainly calling in not because somebody on CPT said something negative about Brandon Johnson. I have my own business. I don't do any business, with the city or anything like that. I'm not going to go after anyone just because they say something negative about the mayor. But the way you were coming off, and maybe you don't realize this, but I heard you before. I can't remember how long ago it was. You were just laying into him.
I think he's a disaster.
You were laying into him saying he doesn't have any idea what he's doing.
I believe that.
It really comes off, Tori, frankly, kind of racist. Like, did you talk like that about Rahm Emanuel?
Oh, please.
Yeah, very condescending, very patronizing. You made a comment last time you were on this.
Okay, all right.
Today you compared him to a dog.
Robert.
You compared him to a dog, Tori.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to hang up on me because I used the word racist on WCPT.
No,
really?
I just have to say that heaven help us if you get a pass when you're incompetent because of what you look like. So no. Sorry, not buying that.
Well, fine. You can reject it all you want. I'm telling you what it sounds like to a listener who's a progressive who has. I've knocked on thousands, not hundreds, but literally, not exaggeration, thousands of doors for Democrats in my whole life. 98% of the time, 100% volunteer. So I'm a progressive. I got my bona fides too. I'm just saying. I think I want you to look at that because if you want to make a criticism of a progressive
Robert, I think I've got your point. I think I got your point. No, I think we're done, but I thank you for calling. Yeah. No, he's inept because he's inept. That's that. Inept because you're inept. Inept because you didn't really have any leadership experience. Inept because you were chosen to be a pliable, maneuverable, in the hip pocket of a union that usually I support, but who, really have to be a little more realistic. You have to be a little more realistic. When you're running a city like this, you can't just say, well, wouldn't it be nice if the teachers could have everything they wanted? It would be nice, but it's not practical. 19 minutes after 2 o'clock, the Joan Esposito Show. I'm Turi Ryder. Still on a live, local, and progressive station, WCPT.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
Well, now we're in it. If you have a thought about whether or not you think the mayor of Chicago is in over his head, give me a text or call 773-763-WCPT. And what have you done if you've ever found yourself in over your head? I recommend asking for help, and then I recommend that if you ask for help, you actually take the help you've been given. Or at least consider it, none of which the mayor of Chicago seems to be doing. 773-763-9278 is how that number shakes out. If you're purchasing a new home or refinancing your existing home, you need to call Team Hochberg, your trusted local lender. Meet Jordan, 60, score 620, married to Bonnie, 59, score 510. Combined annual income, $80,000. Bonnie's an in-home caregiver who couldn't work during COVID, which destroyed her credit and forced them to live off their credit cards. Jordan reluctantly called David after unsuccessfully trying to refinance multiple times with various lenders. David helped Jordan refinance, pay off $30,000 of credit card debt, reduce their payment $1,500 a month, and created a plan to rebuild Bonnie's credit. So let's review. After Jordan and Bonnie were rejected by multiple lenders, David helped them do cash out refinance, save $18,000 a year, and helped Bonnie revitalize her credit. So if your suffocating credit card debt is keeping you up all night or stressing you out, call David now for a complimentary mortgage review. 855-563-2843 or visit 56david.com. That number again is 855-563-2843 or visit 56david.com. Lower.com, equal housing lender, NMLS 1124061. Being in over your head is not fun. I have to say, I almost feel a little sorry for the mayor of Chicago, but not sorry enough to not say, you know, dude, you need to ask for some help and take it. And just firing people and changing your mind and blowing where the wind blows and taking your allies, ruining your relationships with your allies. This is not serving the city well. It's just not. I actually read an op-ed in Cranes, which is pretty much right down the middle of the line, editorially speaking, suggesting that the mayor just resign. I wouldn't suggest that. I think his heart is in the right place. But take help, man. Take it. Let's go to Dave in Huntley. Hi, Dave. Welcome. You're on WCPT. Hey, Dave.
Tori.
Hi.
Listen, I appreciate you taking the phone call. I just wanted to give you a call and give you a little bit of support after that last telephone call. I thought your opinions on Mayor Johnson were pretty factual. I mean, to be honest with you, but it just seemed to be a shame that we can get so indoctrinated about certain things that we can't even look at black and white anymore. It's just ridiculous. But anyway, thank you.
Well,
I thought you did a great job. And,
thank you so much. By the way, what do you, in your armchair quarterback position, or in your case, behind the wheel, what do you think the mayor should do right now that he's made a total hash of the budget process, the school board, the president of the school board? What now for the mayor if you were running the circus?
Well, I tell you what, I've never even thought about trying to run the circus, and I know I couldn't. But like you pointed out, somebody's got to take some accountability somewhere. I realize he didn't put us in this spot, or Chicago in this spot, but somebody has to at least start wiggling their way back out of it. And his thoughts, his policies will not allow that to happen at all. And it's just a shame.
I don't think he has a policy. I think it's like desperation move. But thank you, Dave. Yeah. And I think you pointed out something really important. And I'm going to let you focus on the road because I know it's busy out there. So thank you. When you are in a position like this, and you didn't make it, you can still make progress. I was not a huge fan of Mayor Lightfoot, but she did some good things. And one of the things she did was make some hard decisions about trying to settle up, if you will, with the teacher's pension. She didn't make a lot of friends doing it, and she had a lot of other difficulties with the media and the public, but she really made a stab at getting both sides to understand, we the taxpayers who pay into this fund, and the city council and the budgeting process and the teachers. She really made an effort to get everybody at the table and making some concessions that could move the problem along towards a solution. And I know a lot of people really like to hate on Rahm Emanuel, and I got I got such a fight with my girlfriend, the retired teacher, whom I adore. And I don't think we've ever had a fight like this before. She taught for years in some of the more, I believe the politically correct term for it now is under-resourced communities. And she was really against closing any schools because she believed that they served as community anchors. And I thought that the mayor had a point, that if you've got a school that was built to serve a couple hundred kids and there are 35 kids there and you have to fully staff it and heat it and maintain it, and that's just crazy. I think that Emanuel fell down on the job when it came to providing the promised alternatives. But I think that Chicago has to take a hard look at its population. The teachers may not like it when some schools close, but they could be moved to other schools. And we could do a little attrition when people retire at those pensions that they've worked hard and paid something into. But that was a hard call, but the mayor made it. This is my point. Hard call. Unfortunate that when you're in the position having to make that hard call. But you have to if you're really a leader. If you're really a leader, sometimes you have to tell people stuff that they do not want to hear. And that includes the people who worked really hard to get you elected. And that is how you build credibility. That is how you build trust. At this point, the mayor of Chicago, I don't know who trusts him. I really don't. We're about to see people who come in to serve on the school board who were elected by us, and they're upset before they even get there. This is the kind of just scheming, low life, fly by night. It's a temporary victory, but a long-term loss for everyone. For everyone. Coming up, you're going to get to hear from some people who are a lot smarter than I am about a lot of things today. You will be one of my favorite progressive corporate, she's like a watchdog. We're going to hear from Nell Minow. She is vice chair of Value Edge Investors, and she wrote an absolutely brilliant column about what's going on in the war on diversity. In a moment, the most bizarre, she fishes them out. She finds stuff where like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that was happening. You're going to hear from her in a moment on WCPT, and other people coming up. You're going to hear my second banned books author is going to be joining me. I seem to be collecting these amazing people who write these amazing books that are so influential that they get banned all over the place. Also, just for fun, where do the bees go in the winter? What if they're local bees? What if they don't want to leave? What happens then? You're going to find that out. And speaking of labor, a really interesting and powerful woman who's had a long history with labor unions and now consults them. You'll be hearing from her later on as well. We are WCPT. It's Joan Esposito's show, live, local, and progressive. I'm Turi Ryder in for Joan.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
Oh, sweet. 2:32. I am Turi with you, Ryder, like those rental trucks you see out there. And I am joined by Nell Minow. I've been a fan of hers for a while, but it's my first chance to really speak with her. Nell, welcome to WCPT.
Well, I'm very, very happy to be on with you. Thank you.
Nell is the vice chair of Value Edge Investors. Just for fun, she's also a movie critic and a writer. I'm assuming that's for fun. I'm assuming that's not a chore that you go, oh, my God, I have to review some movies today. That's awful. Is that accurate?
It is unquestionably the most fun job in the world. But my husband says he thinks it's very funny that I managed to find out one but two jobs where I do nothing but criticize people all the time, because I'm basically a corporate critic and a movie critic.
You know, that's a good observation. That's why we marry guys like that. They can put those things together. Like, oh, yeah, my husband, well, you're only happy if you're complaining. This is the perfect job for you.
And you can get paid for it. Isn't that great?
Yes. Well, there is a concept of the evil tongue, bad-mouthing people, where you're really supposed to avoid it. And whenever I am supposed to admit to this particular sin or shortcoming, I'm like, wait a minute. The bad-mouthing people puts a roof over our heads, pays the light bill. How am I supposed to give that up? Anyway, you are... one of the things that I've noticed about you is that you're always ahead of the curve when it comes to sniffing out bad corporate behavior, strange lawsuits that are almost bellwethers for horrible court decisions yet to come. And you wrote a column that really people should just take a look at about the Texas judge who threw out apparently an agreement, a settlement between Boeing and passengers. Can you paint the picture of what that lawsuit was about? Because unfortunately, Boeing's had a few of those problems lately.
They certainly have. They've had many, many. This is not about the space station. This is about the two terrible, very high-profile crashes that they had of their 737 MAX planes. Terrible, terrible tragedies. And this is only a partial settlement. A part of that, the U.S. government reserved the right to bring additional charges. But this has been negotiated over many, many months, many years. And what they agreed to, with the participation of the families of the people who were killed, is they agreed to a very long, complicated, but I think important step forward in the settlement, which involved a fine. It involved restitution to the families. It involved some, as I said, they've reserved the right to file additional lawsuits, and a key provision of this settlement, which makes perfect sense because they found, among other things, that Boeing admitted that they had misled the government about their safety procedures. And so this settlement provided that for a limited period, I think it was 5 years, they would have to have an independent person come in and look over their safety procedures to make sure that we were getting the true story. Okay, so they said, we don't trust you anymore. We want to have an independent person come in. And there's one line in this long, complicated legal document, one line that says, and this is standard in all federal documents of this kind, at least until January when we had a new president, and it says, and when you select that person, you will have to consider diversity, equity, and inclusion. In other words, you have to search broadly and find the very best possible person and not the first white person, the first white male that you see. Okay, the judge threw out the entire big, complicated settlement because he didn't like that one sentence.
And how did the judge phrase, I'm guessing the judge was a white guy, just, call me nutty. But yeah. And how did he phrase that? I'm going to throw out this whole pages and pages and carefully negotiated and expensive legal time. I'm going to throw this all away because I don't like you got to look around and pick the best person, not just the first white guy. What was his statement about that?
Well, he said that because the families wouldn't get to pick who the person was, not that the families are experts in certifying the safety of aircraft, that he was going to throw it out. And he said that he wanted to have a role. He thought the judge should decide who the person was. But basically, he expressed a great suspicion that DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, really means picking somebody who's not qualified. And it has never meant that. No one has ever said it meant that. No one has ever tried to make it mean that. And in fact, there have been studies that have shown as recently as this year over many, many different countries that programs that are more intentionally inclusive, programs that search more widely to get the very best people, guess what? They are more productive, they have happier employees, and they do better over the long term.
Well, yeah, because they get the very best people. It just seems sort of logical. Like if you have a bigger pool and you fish in a bigger ocean, you catch bigger fish. Or
you do.
You give smaller fish an opportunity to move up the fish ladder there. So nobody's suggesting, as you correctly point out, that they hire somebody. I've been going after the mayor of Chicago. I don't know if you heard that, but nobody's suggesting you give Mayor Johnson the job. I mean, even though that seems to be his specialty, getting jobs he's not qualified to do at the moment. But nobody's suggesting that. They're just suggesting that you don't get to, as you put it, just hire the first white guy that comes along. So he threw the whole thing out. And this is Texas. Texas is becoming ground zero for absurd court rulings and people who deliberately take their lawsuit to Texas because you'll get one of these judges who just seems to have, where are they finding these judges in Texas?
They're finding them from the Federalist Society, which exists solely for that purpose of finding basically judges who will follow what they call an originalist interpretation of the Constitution. I'm a lawyer. I'm familiar with the Constitution. They are making up ideas that, believe me, Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson never had. And just to go back to the subject of Texas for a minute, one issue that I've been tracking for a while in Texas is that just like they don't like diversity, equity, and inclusion in Texas, they don't like looking at environmental issues in Texas because, of course, they've got a lot of oil industry people there. And so they have some of the strictest laws in the country about what kinds of financial relationships they can have. And any financial firm that has concerns about environmental risk, they will not do business with. So that includes most of the big firms on Wall Street. And that has cost the state over $700 million by refusing to do business with the big established firms on Wall Street, which understandably look at environmental risk as part of an investment.
But they love Elon Musk. They do. They'll let him literally knock baby birds out of the tree. That we were talking about that the other day. The way that they went after him, it was very clever. We were talking to somebody about zoning, a professor who had written a book about zoning, and the way that they are finally going after his royal muskiness is by going after him on the basis of water rights, because they do have rules about not messing with the water table. And so that's the only fence they have to corral him with. But back to this Texas thing, did Boeing, formerly Chicago's Boeing, I mean, don't blink or you'll miss Chicago's Boeing, but did Boeing shop this case to Texas? How did the case end up in Texas in the first place?
No, this had to do with the Justice Department. I'm not sure how they picked this judge, but this is where it was, because Boeing is not the plaintiff in the case. It's the U.S. government that's suing them criminally for these crashes. So no, but you're right that Texas is absolutely nutty. And as you know, Tesla, Elon Musk was so upset that the Delaware judge threw out the $58 billion pay package that his brother, the chef, who is on his board of directors, and his other nitwit board members approved, that he moved the company's incorporation to Texas. And the dirty secret of corporate governance is you can move your state of incorporation without moving a single piece of equipment, a single human being. You can decide tomorrow that you want to incorporate yourself in any one of the 50 states, and you wouldn't have to do anything except file some paperwork.
Well, historically, if I understand it correctly, that's why so many financial services companies went to Delaware, because they were gentler I don't know if you will.
Exactly.
Yes.
Delaware has always had the reputation. Delaware, as you know, the second smallest state. They're not going to have a great big industry there, and they have profited tremendously. It's their biggest industry in Delaware is lawyers representing corporations. They have most American corporations are based there, at least on paper, because they have the loosest rules, the most favorable rules for boards of directors. But even that wasn't good enough.
I was going to say, even there. But to be fair, I will be fair, sort of, to Elon Musk here.
Okay.
Every time he pitches a fit, he seems to end up in Texas because he didn't like California's. I mean, we were in California for many, many years, and his factory was just down the road from us, and he was annoyed at the COVID policies in California, and he wound himself up and took himself to Texas for his engineering and manufacturing. So he seems to feel that Texas is like his personal survivalist shelter down there. And
absolutely. Well, he does love the letter X, and there you go. It's right there in the middle.
How could I have missed? I'm so glad you're on here today because these are the kinds of observations. I might have cruised right by that one. I was so wrapped up in trying to figure out if it really were so that he was making one of his baby mothers live in a tool shed that I totally missed. I don't know if did you catch that story? I made Grimes live in a tool shed.
Yeah.
It's interesting. If you are making how many billions? $58 billion a year? Is that what it was?
He was trying to get. So far, the judge is still throwing it out, but
right.
he's appealing. But yeah, he said he should get $58 billion.
That's a lot of tool sheds. It really is a lot of tool sheds.
For the guy who is already the richest guy in the world.
Yes,
So what we're saying to him is, he's not Jeff Bezos who's going to get a yacht that has a yacht that has a yacht. He is going to buy the U.S. government. That's what he's going to do with it. This is exactly, I don't want to be super populist or anything.
Oh, go for it. Go for it. I caught so much crap today for saying that Brandon Johnson is not qualified to be the mayor of Chicago. You're not. Come on, bring it on. Be populist because I sure as heck run hot and cold on that one.
Well, it's not that I object to people making a lot of money. We love it when people invent things and make a lot of money. Steve Jobs, go ahead, make a lot of money. But when you let them have that much money and they're not paying as many taxes as we are, then what you're doing is you're giving them the opportunity to completely skew the entire economy. You're giving them, when you think about what Elon Musk, from his perspective, he spent hundreds of $millions to get this election for Donald Trump. But in terms of how much money he has, it would be like you or me spending $150.
I don't even understand. I mean, I think there's a piece missing in him, just some kind of piece that's missing that he has extrapolated. I mean, there's this weird way that Elon Musk is stupid. Now, I'm going to explain what I mean by this, because obviously he's very, very smart, and obviously he's a very, very brilliant engineer. But there's this little piece of humility that he seems to be missing, where he assumes. Well,
they say that he's on the spectrum, and he may be on the autism spectrum.
I know so many people who are autistic that I would want to protect from this definition, because as you know, there is a myth that people who have autism or are on the spectrum don't have feelings, and I don't want to put him there, but he extrapolates from the fact that he is absolutely and undeniably brilliant in some areas to assume from that or to deduce from that he is brilliant in every area. And I'm just waiting for the American populace, like something out of Yertle the Turtle, to go, excuse me, we're burping and you're falling. And it hasn't happened yet, but I keep hoping. Is there any chance now, as you look at his trajectory, that it'll come beyond people like me going, please take me off your Tesla mailing list. If you gave me one, I wouldn't drive it.
I think so. I think that what really has hit people hard is the complete dumpster fire that he created at Twitter, which I'm going to continue to call Twitter, just like I'm going to continue to call the Sears Tower the Sears Tower. So, yeah, he turned what was very flawed, but was very worthwhile, was very engaging, was very productive, was very civilized, which had moderation to make sure that it didn't get completely out of hand, and he turned it into an absolute disaster. And he's, as you know, losing people like crazy. I actually don't think he's brilliant. I don't think he's a brilliant innovator. I think he's very aggressive, but if you look at the companies that he's bought, you look at the amount of money that he started with, I think he's very good at coming up with ideas and hiring people to make those ideas happen. And I think he's got a ruthlessness more than a brilliance.
Well, I will respond. I have a tiny little inside scrap for you here. I have a relative who's an engineer for Tesla. Mm-hmm. And she tells me that, because she's been there a long while, and in the days when he would come in to the manufacturing floor in, I guess, Pleasanton, I think it was, she says he would come in and he'd walk around and then he'd make a suggestion. And she said the suggestion was always a good one. It always made the operation better. I do think he's an engineer with tremendous talent and all the rest of what you're saying. But I would add, I really do think that he... And maybe it's because he's not bothered with little concerns like, who would this hurt? Mm-hmm. Maybe if you just don't care what happens to people, your workers, like with his self-driving car, if you don't care that mathematically it's going to kill a bunch of people before you get it right, then I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, but, he himself is very thin-skinned. Famously, almost like the story of Sleeping Beauty, he was so angry he wasn't invited to the party when they had an event at the White House about electric cars, that he became furious and decided that he wanted to throw the Democrats out of office. And similarly, when one of his kids came out as trans, he all of a sudden decided that the problem in the world was we were all too woke. And those were two things that had never been issues for him before.
Yeah, he I think of him more as Rumpelstiltskin. If you name him correctly, he just stomps his way right through the floor. Returning to, because it's so much, I like having you around because you're fun on a tangent. If you could stick with me, I want to return to this Texas judge.
Yes.
And talk a little bit about what happens next. So if you will stick with me, you're listening to Nell Minow. She's the vice chair of Value Edge Investors. Can I just say you're a bunch of corporate troublemakers in the name of accurate?
We try to be.
Yes, in the name of making sure that companies are better than their worst selves. That's really, I think. Would that be accurate, would you say? That they don't give in to their worst impulses. And she does it with information and accurate observation and razor wit, which is why she's also a fun movie critic and writer. You should follow her movie reviews. They're fun. All right, more of Nell in just a moment. It's Joan Esposito Show. I'm Turi Ryder in for Joan on WCPT Live, Local, and Progressive.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
10 minutes before 3 o'clock. In a moment, more of Nell Minow, Vice Chair of Value Edge Investors. But I want to flag for you that Patty Vasquez, who could have easily taken this evening off, no one would have faulted her. She could have just said, Christmas Eve, I must be. And she is just a dedicated family woman, but she's going to drive you home or to wherever you're going on Christmas Eve. She'll be in with Elliot Serrano for a special broadcast, so don't miss Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez. It starts at 5 tonight on WCPT. Nell Minow, we were just talking about this judge in Texas who threw out a multi-page, very expensive, carefully negotiated settlement between passengers of Boeing and Boeing for the disastrous crashes of their ill-inspected and improperly manufactured airplanes. Would that be accurate?
Yep, that's exactly right. Let's say his name, okay?
Say his name.
Judge Reed O'Connor.
All right. Reed O'Connor in the halls of shame and infamy. What's become of the judge? Is he being lauded around Texas, or are the titans of business coming after him? What's the story with him now?
I don't think anybody's paying any attention to it. I was very lucky that I happened to come across this, but I haven't seen any serious reporting about it.
And he threw out this settlement because there was language in there that when they looked for an independent oversight of Boeing, they had to include a DEI proceeding and examine people of all backgrounds. I mean, this is the weird thing about the anti-DEI folks. I have had my share of difficulties with the way that DEI is implemented and groups who are omitted oftentimes because of stereotypes, like they have a lot of power or they have a lot of money, and I think we know who we're talking about here. But in general, the principle behind DEI is a lovely one and a useful one, and if applied appropriately, produces, as you pointed out, excellent results. And not to want it is it almost in a way of saying, oh, you couldn't possibly find a person of color who would be a good oversight. So, but let's take it one further. If you really believe that you couldn't possibly find a competent person of color to be in an engineering or business capacity and oversee Boeing's manufacturing process, then what would be the harm in looking?
Absolutely, of course. And, over and over and over, we have seen documented studies, quantitative studies that cover many different countries, many different corporations, that employees are happier, employees are feeling more secure, they are more loyal, and over time, the companies do better. Partly because diversity of employees means diversity of experiences. And you know who else is diverse? Customers. And if you want to appeal to a wide range of customers, if you want to appeal to, if you want to create products that are responsive to the needs of a wide range of customers, then it's good to have people around who come from a wide range of perspectives.
So the Republicans really campaigned on this anti-DEI platform. Yeah. And the Democrats, unfortunately, were embarrassed about some of the misapplications of DEI. So speaking about DEI more broadly, what could the Democrats or the progressives do in order to provide an effective and appropriate response to people who say that this just can't work because you're going to promote people who are unqualified and we want the best people? How can that be repositioned so that the fact of the matter, which means we're going to look harder, how can that be? How can people be reassured that really is what would happen?
Well, I think it's very important to be transparent about how that process works and to say, it's not a quota system, but the fact is, for example, if you're going to be interviewing at a lot of colleges, you've got to interview at the historically black colleges. Why not? They've got outstanding people there, and to overlook them is just, it's just crazy. And so you want to do that. You want to be transparent about what your process is. You want to be clear about what the qualifications are for any particular job. We will not hire anybody who doesn't have these credentials, this amount of experience. And I think that will reassure people that you're not cutting corners.
Well, that seems so simple. I wonder why. I wonder why the Democrats didn't manage to get that point forward in the last cycle. Mm-hmm. Too late now. So what do we do with this judge? And because I believe that Texas and Florida are two states now where they're about to make it illegal to employ a DEI process. Do I have that correct?
Yeah. And you'll see that when the new administration comes in, they're going to remove the words DEI. Just as they remove words like climate change. But in my opinion, even though they will remove that language, and as I said, the language the judge objected to is boilerplate that's in everything that comes out of the Justice Department and their settlements, I think the reality is that people know that there's environmental risk. People know there's a risk from being bigoted in your hiring practices and your promoting practices. And I do think that, as they say in Hairspray, you can't stop the beat. I think that is going to happen, and I think younger people as they grow up are less afraid of diversity than people who are in my age group, I guess.
It has been interesting to look at some of the data coming out of the universities now to see what has changed since they were forced by the Supreme Court to junk a bunch of the processes that they had been using. And I guess it's too soon to see how that soup's going to turn out, but it has not been as damaging as some people feared. Because the schools, in accordance with what you are suggesting, are simply finding other ways to find appropriately qualified students. All I can say is, since you haven't heard any feedback to, say the judge's name, Reed O'Connell?
Yeah.
I'm
Reed,
hoping
Reed O'Connor.
I'm hoping this will have something to do with it now, and that we can give him exactly what he deserves. Nell Minow, thank you so much for being with me. I really appreciate it. And
it was a great pleasure.
I'll look forward to speaking with you again. That's Nell Minow, Vice Chair of Value Edge Investors, writer and movie critic too. Just look her up online. Nellmino, and she has much to say about many things, and you should hear it. It's just about 2:58 WCPT.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
I am that author, I am that podcaster, and I am here with you today. Christmas Eve, if you are a celebrant, maybe you're decorating. Maybe you're just one of those people who can only take so much good cheer. I can't be the only one. I can't be the only sort of small bee, bah, humbug kind of person. I like it. But if I have to hear that jingling Frosty the Snowman in a store one more time, I may melt. Fortunately, we have much to keep you occupied. And in a moment, you're going to meet yet another person who's really appropriate, interesting, useful, and fun read for teens. Has been banned in a whole lot of places. But I do want to check in first with some of the texts that you've been kind enough to send me. And when I say kind enough, that even includes the people who think I am some kind of scourge upon humanity for not being progressive enough. And I don't think I'm going to read every single one of those, because there are just so many people who seem to feel I'm a scourge upon humanity for not loving Brandon Johnson. But I will share at least one of them. You are in over your head. That's right. That's what you're in over your head. Go vote for Ron or get off the air. This is how you get Republicans elected, by your stupid rant. I think you get Republicans elected by voting for Republicans. Just call me nutty. You are right. Brandon Johnson sucks. He's a one-term mayor, in over his head, needs to quit. Bring back Lori Lightfoot. This one was interesting. First, be honest about where the city is financially. Don't stonewall the city council. We don't save that much money by closing schools. These schools are important community places, but you could close some that don't make sense. That's my point. Take the CPI property tax increases. Don't increase super regressive taxes like garbage, water, groceries. We need to bring back the progressive statewide income tax that was voted down by billionaire propaganda and lies. Only the start. Yeah, that tax, the millionaire tax, I'll tell you what was wrong with that one. They just called it the wrong thing, and people went looking on their ballot for it, and they could not find it. People who wanted to tax the billionaires went looking for that on their ballot and could not find it. That was just some bad marketing there. It's my party, but sometimes we screw up. So, speaking of it's my party, I am a library fan, and Democrats are the party of read what you want, and we have historically, and Illinois can proudly say that we passed a support of the library bill. You can't ban books in this state in public libraries. You can't do it. But Sharon Biggs Waller, whom I would like to welcome now to WCPT, has authored several books, I believe, that have made it onto several states and communities' banned books lists. Welcome, Sharon. Thank you for joining us on WCPT.
Hi, Turi. Thanks for having me.
First, let's do a little check here. How many books have you written that have been banned and where?
Okay, well, I have written 3 young adult novels, and only one I know for sure has been banned. It can be tricky to find out whether it has been. The schools and libraries have to post it online. I believe it's the American Library Association has an ongoing list of books that have been banned, but it changes by minute, and so it's hard for them to really know exactly. I found out because I have a Google alert on my name, and there's one in Texas, one in Florida, and most recently is in Tennessee. And yeah.
The book that they banned, which I read the entire book, and by the way, I have to do a little thank you to my girlfriend Matrona who connected us. And Matrona, being the subversive person that she is, I came to visit her from Chicago the other day, and she presented me with a copy to read and then put in a little free library. And she's sending them around the country to states where they have banned books, and she's encouraging people to put them in little free libraries where they're banned in the school libraries. So let's talk a little bit about the book that you wrote, Girls on the Verge. Is it Girl on the Verge? Girls on the Verge. And it is one girl, single girl.
Yeah.
It's plural. Okay, Girls on the Verge. I had that right. So Girls on the Verge is a very political book, but at the same time, it's an adventure. It's a road adventure for teen girls. And let's talk a little bit about that book in general, what it is that makes it so touchy for some people in Tennessee, those thin-skinned wimps down there.
Yeah, well, I believe it was from 2017, my agent called me and said that an editor, Christian Trimmer at Simon & Schuster, asked him if there was a book about teens and abortion because he hadn't had anything come across his desk. And my agent said, I know someone who would be good to write that if you are, comfortable with letting her write it. And I think she'd be great for it. So Joan called me and we talked about it. And I kind of thought, I really would love this because I have 2 other young adult novels and I just love writing for that age group. For various reasons, which we can get into later. But so it is politically charged. At the time that I wrote it, I thought, okay, Texas is based in Texas, and it's about a girl called Camille who gets pregnant the first time she has sex, and she thinks she's being safe, but she wasn't. And, it's the way it is. And so she handles all of it on her own. She's afraid to tell her family because she doesn't want them to look at her in a different way. She wants to be an independent person, and she doesn't want this to mar her relationship with her parents. So she goes on a road trip with another friend and a Christian friend to find an abortion. So in Texas, at this point... Which is where
we should say this takes place in Texas. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I had no dearth of states that I could put this in, but Texas had recently been in the news because of some immigrant girls that had come from Mexico. One was pregnant in foster care, and they wouldn't let her get an abortion. And a company called Jane's Due Process came forward and assigned her a lawyer, and they were able to get her an abortion. But Texas really fought hard against that. So I was really impressed with Jane's Due Process. I interviewed them at length, and they told me what it would take to get a lawyer to talk for a teen. And so they would assign volunteer lawyers to girls that wanted to get an abortion that didn't want to bring in their parents. So these could be foster kids. They could be kids for military abroad, who are emancipated, who are afraid of their parents, so that they would have the ability to speak for themselves. And so lawyers would also speak for them. Of course, Texas didn't like this because they feel like parents should be involved. Anyway, so she goes through that.
Well, let me back that up. Texas didn't like this because despite all of this screaming and yelling about the nanny state, Texas doesn't believe that women can be their own nannies in general. That's their mindset. We don't want the government telling you what to do unless we don't like what you're doing, and then we're going to tell you what to do. Right.
Exactly. you hit it right on the head. Yeah. And so when I pitched this to Christian, I thought this book is going to get banned. And, we talked about it, and I said, I don't care whether it gets banned or not. And I thought it was an important book to tell and for teens to read, to find out, sort of this side of things. And, and then I had to decide whether I was going to tell my own story. And I think that was something that I felt that I had to do. When I was in my 20s, I had an abortion myself in California, and I didn't go through any of that because I lived in a progressive state, and it wasn't a big deal. And so this was in the 90s. And I thought, maybe I shouldn't talk so personally about it. And I thought, no, I have to talk personally about it because I'm telling girls what happened to Camille, and I feel like they should know what happened to me. And it took me a while, and I was really bothered about it for myself. And then I thought, why am I ashamed? I'm not ashamed. I'm writing a book about a girl who shouldn't be ashamed. So that I wrote that part in my author's note.
Yeah, it was really the author's notes. If you do check this book out of the library, find it at a little free library, buy it for a young person. I would say if you have a daughter and you're worried that she won't talk to you if she ever has difficulty, or a granddaughter, you would want to get her this book so that she understands that you will be her advocate and she won't have to go through anything like this if she's afraid or in danger or at risk in any way. I think it's a great conversation opener. And some of the things I really liked about your book, in addition to the fact that you shared your story, I think that it was lovely the way that you presented the Christian friend who's always been the best friend of this young woman who's on a different path, because the young woman who is seeking to, initially she goes through several efforts, and then the road trip is they're off to find some mifepristone, I guess is what you'd be looking for now. But I think it's very clear that you respect the young woman who wants to conduct her life differently, to be a virgin until she gets married and she wears a purity ring, and you don't make fun of her at all. Right. You make it really clear that is her decision, that is her choice, and that's how it should be. And even some of us who are a little creeped out by purity balls, where you go to prom with your dad, that I think that's a little bit odd, but that's just me. I don't think I would want to go to talk about my virginity with my father, because the implication there is that my father has some, but it's done, and you're very clear and you're very respectful. And I loved the fact that you in this book demonstrated exactly what choice is about. It's about respecting everybody's choice. And the people who were painted as less than laudatory were, well, we'll get to that in just a minute. So I'm going to ask you to hang on. You're hearing Sharon Biggswaller, her book, Girls on the Verge. It's her third YA novel, and it covers girls on a road trip when one of them needs to terminate a pregnancy. And it's been banned in, I think she said 3 states, probably, and counting. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. It's 3:15. I'm Turi Ryder for Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
Why, yes, I am radio personality and author and podcaster, and all you need to know is how to spell my name, and you can find me doing any of those things. It's Turi, Ryder like the truck. And back with me, Sharon Biggswaller. She is very successful. How often do you get to say successful author? That almost never happens. But she is. She lives in our neighboring state of Indiana. She has written a book called Girls on the Verge, which was just banned in Tennessee and is on the list in a few other places. So I wanted to talk with you about the heroes and the villains of this book, which you actually reference Thelma and Louise in the book with a sort of a wry, but they don't survive it and we're going to survive it note. And I was grateful for that, because I didn't want anybody driving into the Rio Grande there in Texas. But the people that you paint as the as the villains, if I could say that, are these people in these crisis pregnancy centers who sail under a false flag. Would you like to talk a little bit about those? We have those here. I drive by a bus stop every time I come to WCPT that offers people crisis pregnancy counseling. You want to talk about that? Free, yes.
Yeah,
free,
yeah.
Yes.
I was a Planned Parenthood volunteer escort for quite a while, and we would have a truck like an RV would pull up, and they would have signs like reverse the abortion pill, free ultrasounds. And because the door was closer, their van was closer to our door. When the women and people would come in, they would see that first, and they would think that was Planned Parenthood. So it was like a trap. So we would sort of band out, and we would stand in front of the van and direct traffic away from them. And that's how we were able to do it. And then when they would get out of the car, we would explain, look, they aren't, just ignore them, ignore the people on the hill. We're going to walk you in. We don't want you to be scared. It was that kind of a thing. Because it was so overwhelming for them to come in. And they would have just walked in. I mean, I would have known. Yeah. And, they once you do get in, they have a thing that they'll do where they'll keep you waiting. It's just like with Camille. They'll keep you waiting. They'll say, okay, well, we're just getting the doctor, and they'll hand over these things, and then they'll try in with a hard sell. And by then, the girl, woman, person is sort of already in a heightened state. And when, for instance, when my main character, Camille, has her ultrasound, the technician is talking about how it's a blessing and look at your baby and da-da-da and listen to the heartbeat, which is not a heartbeat. So, yes, they can be very, very damaging for women, and it's a lie. It's one of the lies we have to put up with as being women, unfortunately.
Well, it's really, I'm glad I think I may have told this story, but it bears repeating, I think, on WCPT. There was a young woman that I knew who worked at the radio station where I worked, and she, in her rebellion from her university professor, atheist parents, had become a very devout observer of her particular religious tradition and was very, very much anti-abortion for herself and for other people. I don't know anybody who wakes up and thinks a great day in the morning to have an abortion. That nobody thinks that. But she had a condom accident, and she became pregnant. And she came to me because she was very young and because I was the talk show host of record in that place. And she asked me what were her options. What did she wanted to have the baby. And I said, where was she going to get health care? She was part-time. She didn't have insurance. And I said, well, you got to go to Planned Parenthood. Then they will take care of you. They will not charge you if you don't have money. And it's an abortion bill they'll take. And I said, just if you come to me for help and you come to me for advice, then please accept this one thing as true. No one will make you do anything in that place. So then I waited. Yeah. And she came back a few days later, and I said, well, how did it go? And she said, well, they gave me the resources, and I'll get health care, and I'll be able to have this baby, and I'll have and all the things that you would expect from a private OB-GYN if you were expecting to have a baby. And I said, that's great. And did anybody pressure you into not having the baby? She said, not at all. She said, and then she got quiet. She said, and I used to picket that place. I said, what are you going to do? She said, I'm going to make a donation. And so fast forward, she got her college degree. She is an engineer. She is very successful. She raised her son. She raised him beautifully. She was responsible throughout, and she continues to support Planned Parenthood because she understands that what it's really about is letting people and helping people and supporting people when they make their decision. So reading your book, Girls on the Verge, and if you're just joining us, this is Sharon Biggs-Waller who wrote Girls on the Verge. What I loved about your depiction of these crisis pregnancy centers is it's all about threatening and scaring and not giving you a choice at all. And they claim all kinds of health things will result, and they damage, and they claim that you'll owe them all kinds of money if you don't. Does this actually happen? I didn't know this actually happened. They took information for an emergency contact, and then they threatened to expose that information.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Does that happen?
Yeah, they don't go by the HIPAA law. They're not a clinic in any means. They're just a pretend medical. So they don't have to follow any rules about, giving out information or anything like that. So it's a very big trap. But, I just wanted to comment about your Christian friend and Planned Parenthood. We have had people that have been picketing that clinic that came to the clinic for an abortion. And they think that doesn't apply to them. They're not the same people as those people that go in that they're picketing. And, I think what Muhammad Ali said, plans are all well and good till you get punched in the mouth. And I think that's when you think, okay, I'm going to judge you and I'm going to go about my business. But when I need an abortion, I'm going to get an abortion, and then I'm going to forget all about it. So they don't actually bring it on board. And the other thing that I find, we used to stand and laugh about this. We'd have women come in and say, oh, my doctor from the Catholic hospital, fill in the blank, sent me here because they won't give me birth control pills. So I have to come here to pick up my birth control pills.
Yeah.
So let that sink in for a minute.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. And normally, to your point about the being punched in the mouth, I don't even discuss this issue because, in my opinion, nobody's views of this particular procedure change unless they or someone close to them are pregnant and need one. Yeah. But what I loved about your book was that you didn't just preach at people. You really took people through the experience of being a young girl with plans and goals, and you didn't candy coat it. I mean, it cost this young woman something to walk that path that she walked. I wanted to hear from you about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things I love to write about for young people is because books are so important in their growth. There's only so many things you can experience as a young person and sort of experiment and see who you are. You change on a daily basis. You try this personality on, you try that personality. And books are so good because you can read a book and take your feelings out on a little safe spin. So when you read, especially as a young person, you're feeling those feelings that your character, that main character, and all the characters are going through. For instance, when I think it was in the 4th grade, I read Julia of the Wolves. Oh no, I'm sorry. It was Island of the Green Dolphins by Scott Odell. And it was the first book that I cried for somebody other than myself. And it caught me totally by surprise. And it was a different kind of crying. And then years later, I read a book called Lori, which is very pertinent now. It's about a Jewish girl who goes to Israel, and she works on a kibbutz, and she meets Arabs, and they are having a conflict. And it's the first time I learned empathy. And I've read that book again because I have my copy, and it takes me right back to when I was a teenager. And that's where I learned empathy. So when you can read a book like Girls on the Verge, and you can think about the first time you had sex and what that might be like, and if you did something like Camille did, what would that mean to your life? Would you want to do that, or would you not want to do that? And it's not a sort of a tale of warning, like an old Grimm's fairy tale. It's not. It's just a way for you to try that life on for 2 hours or whatever.
I love how you phrase that. I do. And as a last thought, I suppose, I need to ask you, how does it feel to have written something that parents find so alarming, scary, threatening, dangerous that they don't even want their kids to look at it? Has it brought you any personal threats, or what's that been like?
It's one of those clubs you want to be in because you told the truth, and people don't like the truth. And there are a lot of people who do love this book. The Young Adult Library Association made it the top 10 books in the country in 2019. And that means a lot to me. But also I was talking to my agent's father because he has 2 books that are banned, and I told him about it. He said, "Oh, I've arrived. I said, "You didn't know you were on this list?" "No, I haven't." And there's some beautiful books. Toni Morrison's book, Bluest Eye, Slaughterhouse 5. There's some amazing books on that, and it's something that I choose to wear proudly because I feel like if you banned my book, I did my job.
I love that. We're going to leave it there, and I will recommend again, if you have any young women in your life or young men who are involved with young women, I can highly recommend Girls on the Verge. And even if you're doing last-minute Christmas shopping, if you don't have the actual book to present, you can blot out the number and put your receipt in a nice little envelope with a bow. And I think that it does good in the world.
It's also an audiobook.
Audiobook. You could do that. I cannot do audio. Did you read your own audiobook?
No, I have a wonderful, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, the narrator that Simon Schuster.
It was the hardest thing I ever did to narrate my own. I just hated it. And furthermore, I keep checking audiobooks out of the library and fall asleep every time. I'm a reader. Give me the book in my hand. But if you're not, or if you're going to be with the family driving somewhere for the holiday, that's a good idea. And if you're in a car with family, that'll be a conversation starter. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. That's Sharon Biggs Waller. Her book, Girls on the Verge, is banned in Tennessee and a couple of other places. And I guess now you know why. 328, Turi Ryder in for Joan Esposito on WCPT, live, local, and progressive.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author, Turi Ryder.
Oh, sweet. Why, thank you. It is sweet. We're going to talk about sweet in just a moment. We're going to talk about bees. We're going to talk about honey. And facts do matter. So we're going to get some facts on the ground straight about where the bees in Chicago go in the winter. You want to know this. Other things you need to know, you do need to know. Patty Vasquez could have just said, having Christmas Eve off, but she is going to drive you home or to your Christmas Eve celebration or any place you need to go tonight. She is steadfast, steady on, Patty Vasquez. And her guest tonight will be Elliot Serrano, and they're going to do a special Christmas Eve broadcast starting at 5, hour and a half from now. Now, tomorrow, Richard Chu is going to, he has... You know how gorgeous quilts are, a little piece of this, a little piece of that, a lot of handwork, putting it together. He has quilted for you a look back on some of his favorite interviews of the year gone by, including Congresswoman Robin Kelly, Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul, Allison Gill, Kurt Mullett, Michelle Duster. Is it Duster or Duster? I'm not sure how she pronounces that. And Karen Byrne. All of that for you to mull over or chew over. Choose Views, which is always here weekday mornings from 6 to 8. And it's going to be a chance for you to really enjoy some of the best of Richard Chu. And even if he wouldn't say it was one of his best days, he has so many good ones that you can't go wrong. And that'll be tomorrow morning. And then I'm going to be back. On Thursday. So, in the summer, when your flowers are out in your garden, you go to the park, there are the bees. You just sort of take them for granted. They're doing their thing. And responsible parents, you're teaching your kids bees are do-gooders. They're good to have around. They pollinate. They make honey. They disappear in the winter. Where do they go? Joining us, Jana Kinsman. She has this absolutely fantastic, I don't know if you could call it business, nonprofit company. She'll tell me how to ID it. She's the founder of, wait for it, Bike a Bee. What? I hear you say, what is Bike a Bee? Jana, welcome. You're on WCPT. So first of all, for people going, what? Are these bees on bikes? Are they on unicycles? Is it a flea circus? What is Bike a Bee?
Yeah, so Bike a Bee is a business that I started about 13 years ago. I started placing beehives in community gardens and at local farms, and I started visiting all my hives by bicycle. I didn't have a car at the time. So I wanted to just show that you could do anything with a bicycle.
Wow. How did you trick out? I say this as the spouse of someone and the mother of someone else who ride their bikes in Chicago all winter long. I got a kid on a bike for transit in Toronto. I got a spouse on a bike all over Chicago. But even so, how do you move a beehive on a bicycle? I mean, don't they get rattled around? Don't they get upset?
They don't stay on the hive. They stay in the garden and farm where they live, and I just visit them. They're stationary.
Okay, so when you bring somebody a new apiary, you don't bring it loaded with bees on the back of your bicycle.
I used to do that, but they would kind of all be in different components instead of one full hive.
Oh, okay. So you had small communities of bees. I'm trying to visualize this. And I'd like for the folks listening, because now I have this vision of like the Barbie dream house of bees with that. And I also have a vision of them following you along like the cartoon, of Swarm. How did you, seriously, how do you move a hive of bees, even in parts, on a bicycle? How do you do that?
Well, when I would start a hive back then, you would get like a starter colony that came in a small screened box that was securely closed.
Well, thank God for that. Goodness. Wow. I'm glad, right. Already my blood pressure is coming down. So good. Okay. They're in a screen box. Can't just fly around and go, why am I on a bicycle? Okay. Got it.
Yeah. But even if there was like, a full beehive that was all put together with bees in there, you just close up the hive at night to make sure they can't fly out, and then just strap it together and then move it in the morning. We do this all the time on bicycle or in a vehicle, in a truck or a van.
So you just close the door. There's a door, you can close it. Okay. All right. Well, this is all good news. Okay. So Chicago has been told and the burbs, and I dug up my whole front yard. It's flowers, backyard, vegetables and flowers. I can't say I did all of it. The people we bought the house from also had done some of it, but I've done this in other places. I have a war on grass.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
And so we try hard to have things. We have one particular, it's like an allium. It's a garlic flower. Bees love this, and it blooms pretty late in the season. So I was worried about the bees because they were out right into the fall. And where were they going to go after that? What do they do when it's cold out?
Right. So honeybees stop flying out of the colony, out of the hive, once it becomes below 40 degrees and there's no sun. So whether that's, in the middle of summer, like if it's at nighttime, they fly in the hive, they go into the hive, or if it's fall or winter, they just stay inside the hive. They can't, fly out of the colony. They need their sisters inside the colony to keep warm and active.
Okay.
So if they fly out, they perish.
What if there's a freakishly warm day in a time of year where it's normally cold and there's nothing out there for them to really alight upon and feast upon? What happens then?
Well, honeybees are interesting because they live through the winter, so they spend the entire summer gathering nectar and turning it into honey so that it can be stored for the winter when there's nothing available for them to eat. So wild colonies, they just store as much honey as they can and then just eat through it all winter long. But in a managed colony such as mine, I have to be very careful and make sure that I leave them with enough honey. I take some to sell, and then I leave them with enough honey for them to eat over the winter time. But if there's a warm day in the middle of winter, it's actually really great for them because they famously do not poop inside of their colony. So on a warm day, they need to fly out and do what they call a cleansing flight.
A bathroom break. It's a bathroom break for bees. That right there. If I do nothing else, this whole radio show, if nobody learns anything else, bees don't poop in their hive. They go out for a bathroom break in the winter, even though they're hibernating. They'll go out if it's warm to poop.
Yeah, it's crazy. And they're not even hibernating. They're very active inside the hive. They're eating through their honey. They're vibrating their wing muscles, using the energy that they get from the honey in order to produce heat, and that keeps the cluster of all the bees warm so that they can survive through till spring.
Now, is it true that they move around so that you get a turn at the inside where it's really toasty, and then you have to spend some time at the outside where it's chilly?
Yeah, I think so. just like that penguin movie, right?
Oh, yeah.
The penguins do the same thing.
So the bees do the same then. All right.
Yep.
So if you are a dedicated apiary keeper in Chicago, you will notice that. And so what, should you close the door on the hive for their protection in the winter and then just open it if the weather warms up? Or should you just leave it open all the time and figure they know what they're doing?
Well, we always make sure that the entrance is as small as possible because there still needs to be airflow for them because they breathe air just like us.
Yeah.
And then, they fly out as they need to. You know, they're going out for their cleansing flight. They're bringing out bees that die just to throw them outside of the hive. So we just make sure the door is open at all times. And I'm like taking a break. So I don't want to be around. I don't want to have to babysit them when it gets warm to open up all their entrances. They can manage it on their own. How
many entrances does a typical urban beehive have?
During most time of the year, just one.
Okay. All right. So it's not like patio door, balcony, main garage door, none of that. No.
Sometimes. In the summer months, sometimes we give them a top entrance or, multiple entrances at the bottom. We open the entrance up really wide so that plenty of bees can come and go when it's peak summer and there's a lot of activity. But generally there's just one and it's towards the bottom.
Okay. This is all very interesting. So I'm fascinated by the bee pooping when it leaves the hive. Maybe this is just me being completely juvenile. Do they poop anywhere, or do they poop while they're flying, or they go a particular place like your dog might go, or what? How does that happen?
Ooh, great question. I don't know. I think they just fly and poop.
Fly and poop.
They just, as they fly, they just poop as soon as they can. It's a bad sign. Sometimes they poop as soon as they fly out of the hive and they get poop all over the front of their hive. And that's a bad sign that maybe the colony is sick with what we would call a dysentery sort of disease.
Bee diarrhea, you're telling me? There are bees that get... Oh, boy. And so don't stand. When you've opened up the door a little more on a warm day, don't stand right there.
No, and oh my gosh, I have my car parked on the street at my home apiary. I find bee poop on my car every winter time when I know the bees have been flying because they're just flying everywhere and pooping everywhere.
What does it look like?
Like teeny tiny drops of mustard. It's very pleasant as far as poop goes.
Oh, okay. All right. It's not like you okay. I'm feeling a little better. I'm just, and people who are listening are going, what is wrong with Turi that she's so fascinated with bee poop? What the heck? But I never even thought about it. I mean, I read the book to my kids. Everybody poops. That's how we do the toilet training thing. But did it ever occur to me that bees? No, it did not. So thank you for that. Okay. Let's talk about, I'm going to give you a specific question in a minute. Can you hold on?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Great. That's Jana Kinsman. She is the proprietress of Bike a Bee, because she started her business some years ago with a GoFundMe grant, I read, a GoFundMe collection. And she originally ran her whole business from her bicycle, delivering apiaries and collecting honey. So more of Jana and my specific non-poop related question in just a moment on WCPT. I'm Turi Ryder in for Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
Just about 3:45. I am Turi with you, Ryder Like the Truck. And yes, that's my book. And I suppose I should say that I was very grateful to read that some people had bought copies as gifts for friends this year, especially young women who have ambition. That just chuffed me. Made me just swell right up with joy. And thank you for that. And yes, there's also an audiobook. We are visiting with Jana Kinsman. She is the creator of a really interesting small business here in Chicago, Bike a Bee. Now there's a vehicle involved, I understand, but if you buy honey at a farmer's market, you might very well be buying Jana's honey, although she sets up hives in all kinds of interesting places. Welcome again, Jana. Where are your hives located for the most part?
Thank you. I have most of my hives on the south side of Chicago, and most of them are in community gardens and urban farms.
I do have some at schools, a couple at breweries. One location is on the 606 trail on the north side, and a couple private, like, residences that are just, friends that have really nice spots for the bees.
Which brings me to my question. My girlfriend, who keeps bees and chickens and grows everything, and there's a tiny little a patch of grass in her garden so that you can have a little picnic there and enjoy being surrounded by bees and birds and chickens and fruit and flowers and all that stuff. But she's had some bad luck in the wintertime where her bees just abandon the hive. What is that? What happens there? Why do bees go, you know what, we're leaving?
Yeah, so that's actually a symptom of mite infestation. So there's this little tiny mite called varroa mites that are an introduced species that co-evolved with the Asian honeybee Apis ceranae, but made the jump over to Apis mellifera, which is the European honeybee, which is what we keep. The European honeybee cannot handle this mite. They do not live, peacefully together in balance. And when there becomes too many mites in the colony, the bees the mites hold a lot of diseases. The bees just become overcome with sickness. So I know, it's really sad. So mites are probably the hardest aspect of beekeeping. So I would recommend that your friend get a really airtight treatment plan for their bees. There's a lot of treatments out there, some more effective than others. Definitely happy to help her, of course. Like, I love advising and helping people on this stuff. But, yeah, the mites are really tricky, and they really affect the bees going into winter. So,
assuming that your bees have just left, they've said this place is literally like a flea bag hotel. We're not staying. This is awful. We're going. So, would you, if you had a beehive that had been afflicted, would you just sort of torch the thing and start over, or what would you do?
No. So the mite's effect on the bees actually causes them to, I don't know exactly how to explain it, but it causes them to lose track of where they live.
Oh, wow.
So they fly out and they don't know how to get home because they're so sick, and their body is literally being sucked dry by these mites.
Oh, awful.
But there's no disease that the mite gives them that causes that leaves the equipment unusable. There are other diseases where you should be torching the entire colony, but those we don't get as commonly in this area.
Okay, this is so interesting. And do you run through your Bike a Bee business a bee resource page online for people if they're interested in getting started or learning more?
I don't. I wish I had the time for that. I do house calls and I work one-on-one with beekeepers, but I'm just I'm so bad at social media and putting that together. Other people are way better at that than me.
So you recommend to other people then where they can go. That's just as good.
Absolutely.
That's the whole, yes. What difference does it make if it's yours or somebody else's? You need to recreate the bee wheel there. I just refer them to all my smart people. So, I'm a lot of smart friends on this. Now. Tell me, let's be fair. So, what do kids, especially in school gardens, what do they say to you about bees when they begin keeping them and after they've been doing it for a while?
Yeah, there's a lot of apprehension in the beginning, but then it just becomes part of their everyday life, getting to see the bees. I think it enriches, their environment, and the whole point of my project when I started it was to put bees in public areas where people could see them and kind of develop their own opinion about them instead of just being afraid of them or having never, seen a hive before, just assuming that it's going to be dangerous. So it's been pretty successful with all of the community gardens and schools that I've worked with.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Now, let me ask you the last question of this whole series of strange questions I've asked you, including about bees and bathroom breaks. When you eat your lunch and bees want to come and have your lunch with you and you do not wish them to have your lunch with you, first of all, are those bees or just wasps, or do bees want to come and have your lunch with you? And if they do, how do you convince them that this is your lunch and not their lunch?
So chances are what's bothering you are yellow jacket wasps. Those become extremely common from the month of August up until the very first hard freeze. And they just relentlessly bother people at picnics, at every outdoor eating opportunity. And the way that you can identify them from honeybees is they are not fuzzy, and they're more of a lemon yellow color, whereas honeybees are more brown to black to orange. They're never yellow. There's always an orangishness to them. But yeah, yellow jackets are horrible. Swat them, kill them. I really do not care. I do not care for them. They torment honeybee colonies. They're my least favorite insect.
Really? They pick on they're bullies? They pick on the honeybees?
Oh, big time. Yeah, especially weaker, small colonies. Like, they're so mean.
They want to eat the honey, or what do they want to do to them? Eat the bee?
They want to eat the larva, and so that's why you see them at human picnics, is because they're omnivorous, so they eat everything. So they're way more interested in meat and everything like that, whereas honeybees are only interested in sweet things, like sugary things. So if you are serving like a huge bowl of punch at your picnic, like chances are you're going to see some honeybees, but mostly what you're seeing, I would say 99.5% of the time, those are yellow jackets.
Just if it helps you at all, I can tell you that yellow jackets absolutely hate Dr. Bronner's peppermint soap.
Ooh, okay.
And you can go out there. I won't tell you how I know this, but you can go out at night when the wasps are in with a really intense spray of Dr. Bronner's peppermint soap, and you can spray the wasp's nest. And not only do they hate it, it sticks them together so they can't really come out and defend themselves. And then I'm not saying how I know this, but you can knock down their nest and stomp all over it if it pleases you to do so. Not that I know that from experience, but just, in case you were wondering how that could possibly happen. I'm just sharing that with you. Yes. Okay. Anything else that I should? Is there something that you're wishing I would ask you about bees?
No, you covered so many good common questions, which I really appreciate. I think we covered a lot here.
What is the strangest question or some of the strange questions that people ask you about bees and beekeeping?
Oh, I don't know. It was kind of like that one where you asked me, like, where do they think about where to poop? Like, those are the things that, like, I never have thought about it before.
Oh, well, count on me for that. Yeah. Well, bathroom really question. Good. Yeah. Do they think about where to poop? Well, now you can. Who's doing good research, by the way? Bee research. Where's that coming from these days?
Oh, man, so many great spots, but I have a really close buddy up at Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, named Trevor Bawden, who has been doing some really cool bee research at the Cook Bee Research Lab up there, and I follow a lot of what he says to a T. He's incredibly smart, doing really cool things pertaining to mites, and he's trying to breed a better queen bee that produces offspring that are mite resistant. So
very cool.
Yeah, and I would even say, like, the USDA is doing a really great job of it. Plenty of universities are doing really interesting bee research because they're a very important part of our economy as far as food production is concerned.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that I lived for years in California, and there are beekeepers who bring their hives. You can rent them, and they will come and bring their bees to your almond trees and other places where you need them. And you're right, they've been facing all kinds of challenges in the wild. So you have some good resources there at your disposal. And I said I was asking you the last question, but I lied. Here's another last question. So you started this with a GoFundMe and your bicycle, and your parents probably said, for this, we sent you to college so you could bike around with some bees on the back of a bike. But now, is it a going concern? Like, can you keep a roof over your head and your parents have settled down, or what?
Yeah, I think it's helpful that I get media attention because I think it validates my lifestyle to my family.
Oh, your parents are going to hear me ask you about bee poop. Oh, nice. Sorry. Yes.
No, I think in the beginning it was difficult, but, I've been doing it long enough now that I make a very nice, modest living doing this. I have other businesses and income streams as well. But the beekeeping, definitely, I'm impressed with how much money it does make. Like, it's crazy. It's a lot of hard, sweaty, painful work, but it makes enough.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you so much, Jana Kinsman of Bike-A-Bee. You can find her online if you have more questions, or if you're a teacher and you want a hive at your community garden or school. She's mostly South Side, West Side, but yeah, I never know. For the right bee, she might flap her wings over or buzz her wings over your way. You don't know. You have to ask. I'm Turi Ryder, and this is Joan Esposito's show. In an hour or so, you will have the opportunity to drive home with Patty Vasquez, but you have another opportunity right now, this minute. Right now, have we disconnected with Jana? Because I'm just okay. It's for some reason it's still lit up on my lovely screen. I don't know why. What do I know? Technically, not my strong suit. Thank you, Alex, for being the technical strong suit. So, if you are a regular WCPT listener, you will have heard, but if you haven't, you should hear about Fry the Coop. They are a destination for hot chicken in Chicagoland. They give a Southern original and a Midwest touch. Whether you want heat, no heat, you can choose. And in a moment, I'm going to give you an opportunity to gather for yourself, using the honey metaphor here, a gift certificate. They feature chicken sandwiches, tenders, chicken and waffles, and now nuggets. This is an interesting spelling of nuggets. I need to speak to the speller of nuggets on my page here. Because if I were pronouncing nuggets the way that it's written, it would be nuggetsy. So just, if you want some nuggets or some nuggetsy, just know. And they deliver happiness with each crunchy bite. And they do not use seed oils in frying. They fried all of their menu items in 100% beef tallow. So stop by Fry the Coop today. One of its many locations from Oak Lawn, Chicago, Elmhurst, Darien, Prospect Heights, Tinley Park, and Bolingbrook. And you can have no heat, mild, medium, hot, or crazy insanity. And how often do you get those choices in life, really? I mean, how often does somebody say to you, would you like some crazy insanity? Not often enough, in my opinion. So to celebrate the holidays, Fry the Coop has given WCPT $25 gift cards as a little gift to you. If you would like one of those gift cards, and why wouldn't you? You should call now. We will take the fourth caller at 773-763-WCPT. That's 773-763-9278. And you know the rules. The contests run on WCPT 820 are open to listeners, 18 or older, residents of the greater Chicagoland, Northwest Indiana area. One entry per person, one winner per household. Void where prohibited by law. Listeners may only win or qualify to win once every 30 days. And we mean it. Complete rules available on our website at WCPT820.com or by clicking the contest tab. It is 3:58. We are live, local, and progressive.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
It is, and I am. It is Christmas Eve for celebrants. It's one of those holidays that's now so ubiquitous that even if you're not celebrating, you could get your fill of it. So I'm here for those of you who are celebrating and for those of you who are like, one more Frosty the Snowman and I'm going to lose it. So either way, you are welcome here at this little island of, I don't think anyone's played Santa Got Run Over by a Reindeer here at all. No, not at all. Not even once. So hallelujah for that. We are known to be here at WCPT, home for unions, labor, pro-labor voices. And I thought that it would be fitting as the year comes to a close and labor that endorsed, Kamala Harris has just had its hat handed to it, to bring in someone who has charted a trajectory from very powerful union activity, union organizing to the almost desiccated state of some unions right now, and to explain how the heck we got here and what should happen next. I have brought labor consultant. She has her own business, Amy B. Dean. I'll just let you, Amy, welcome and kind of explain what it is you do now and how you got here, if you would.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Tori, for having me on your show. I'm a big fan, and I'm delighted to be here. Also, let me just say Merry Christmas to those who do celebrate the holiday. And as someone who does not, I want to just say that Christmas Eve is one of my favorite nights of the entire year.
Really? Why? Why?
It is. It is indeed. If you've ever been to Israel on Shabbat, which is a Friday night, you can hear a pin drop in the streets of the old city. It's so quiet, and everybody is in observance. And Christmas Eve is very much like that in the United States. It's so quiet. Everybody's at home with their families, who have families. And it's just a lovely evening. The lights shine bright, and everybody's sort of in front of their fireplaces who are, lucky enough to have them.
Well, you've just reminded me.
I find it to be one of the most romantic evenings of the year.
Oh, romantic for sure.
Yes, yeah.
And you reminded me, I'm going to add on to what you just said, because you just reminded me.
Sure.
I grew up a little north of the city, and there were some big houses which you never really knew what went on in there. They were big and they were dark, but on Christmas and on Thanksgiving, they were all lit up. And I used to like to start driving right about the Baha'i Temple and go north. And you could actually, as a kid who didn't come from a lot of wealth, you could be like, oh, look how they live in there. Look at what's going on. Look, there's a dining table where 16 people can sit down. Look at that. So that was kind of fun, just to spy on the wealthy. Maybe that's just me ruining Christmas again, but I really liked that, to see how people had these big holidays and elaborate decor, and it was almost always snowing for some reason. I seem to remember it that way. And you would drive north, and there were these beautiful homes with beautiful families, and it was like the Thorn Rooms came to life. The Thorn Rooms in the Art Institute, it looked like that. All those little miniature dollhouse things, all of a sudden full size. Okay, so we've reminisced.
I will tell you, there's another side, though. There's another side I want to bring up, and it grows out of my many years in the labor movement. For many years, I worked in the labor movement where I represented 110 unions and 90,000 members in the Silicon Valley region. And I don't think in all the years that I served in that capacity, leading the labor movement, that there was not somebody in our membership that passed away during the holidays. And I'm certain that for those who are listening tonight, this is probably somebody knows of somebody in the past who has passed during the holiday season. And, I say that because this can also be one of the saddest moments in time for people.
That's true.
And what does this have to do with the labor movement? It has to do with everything. Because for the first time in decades, the labor movement is well-liked. Poll after poll after poll shows people like unions again. And for folks like us who are in the generation that we share, this is just unheard of. Because for most of our lives, the labor movement, and if you said you worked for the labor movement, that was like maybe a notch above if you were an attorney or you were with organized crime. You were not popular.
Oh,
you
dear.
were not popular in the world.
Oh, dear.
If you had a cocktail power, I usually always would tell people, I'm a librarian. I never said I was a union leader or a union organizer before that, because people would just sort of walk away from you. But the point here is that what kind of labor movement, now that the labor movement is in sort of an enviable spot for the first time in many decades, is being built again? Are we building quantity for people, or are we building quality this time? And that's the question that I want to point to. And
let's talk about that, because to circle you back to where you're starting from here, where labor had destroyed its own reputation as being the friend of workers, and people felt fine about vilifying labor and unions with impunity. What did labor do to put itself in that position, and how, in your opinion, has it excavated its reputation and polished it off lately? How's that happen?
That's a great question. All institutions go through life cycles. There are life cycles when you're building and you are on the periphery and you're a movement and you're building to become part of the institutionalized part of a nation. And then there are periods where you are institutionalized, you become part of the institution, and you sort of lose your revolutionary side of your institution, and you forget some of the things the values that brought you to where you are, and you ossify. and sometimes in so doing lose the value that you bring to the constituency that you're intended to work on behalf of.
Well, I'm going to pause you there for a second, and then we'll come back to the trajectory, because as you're speaking, I'm thinking about that life cycle, and I'm thinking that in a weird way, it also... unions had a reputation not just for being powerful, but for wielding their power in kind of ugly ways, and also at one point for corruption and for taking, as you point out, not serving their members, so it's simply taking from their members and living the high life at the very top echelons. Is this also what you're speaking about? Was this part of the process? And if that's part of it, what managed to salvage these unions so that they're in the hands of the people again?
When my grandparents came to this country, and many of them in their generation, they saw labor leaders like Walter Reuther and others as leaders of a broad social vision for America. These leaders were working on things like public housing and public health insurance and things that and civil rights. And things that struck the imagination of a broad swath of our country. And they didn't represent sort of the immediate institutional interests of their members. Now, if you represent 75% of the workforce, you can represent the institutional interests of your members and still have a broad social movement. You represent 10% of the population, you can't represent your institutional interests of your members and speak for a broad social movement. And so as the labor movement began to decline and shrink and lose less and less of the population and of the organized workforce, and as leaders became less and less concerned with a broad social vision, labor became more and more of a sort of a technocratic movement that represented fewer and fewer members. And it became concerned more and more with what kind of contracts it could negotiate every 3 years for its members. And it sort of stuck to its knitting of filing grievances, which were violations of its collective bargaining agreement, and representing its members politically only along the lines of what that industry or that union needed to protect the industry that it represented workers in. And so its political agenda became very narrow. Its agenda in the workplace became very narrow, and it sort of gave up on any broader social vision for working people writ large in America.
Huh. Okay. So I think what you're saying is it was strictly tending its own business, and even that not very well. And for labor unions to thrive, they have to make alliances with labor, as you put it, writ large, with every working person. Do I have that right? And if so, which unions figured it out first?
Well, I think there was a period in the 90s. I go back to the 90s, and I put my finger right around early 90s, as the Clinton administration was coming in, and NAFTA was going to be inevitable.
Boo, NAFTA, boo, boo.
Yeah, and this is an important period to sort of to take a quick return to. The battle in Seattle, where Turtles and Teamsters came together, and prior to the Clinton administration, were very clear and articulate about if we're going to reorganize our trade regime. I mean, NAFTA was, you have to remember what NAFTA was and was not.
Well, NAFTA was before the battle in Seattle, if memory serves, and I do this by radio stations. I got into trouble fighting the people who were pushing NAFTA in Minneapolis, and the battle in Seattle, I was already back in California. So are you saying that it just doesn't matter the time or that NAFTA pushed this green-blue alliance forward? I'm missing something.
Yeah, the latter. The point is, this period in time is that NAFTA created a basis for unity, and it was the very beginning of environmentalists and labor, for the most part, being in relationship with a broader set of community interests.
Got it.
And I mean institutional labor with a broader set of community interests.
Did they elect new people to their governing boards who had that vision, or did some of the old the old timers start to wake up, or was there a particular Pied Piper who said, listen, you've got a natural ally over here and you're not paying attention? Or think about that for a sec, because I'm going to do some business here. And then I want to know, how did it happen that post NAFTA, this alliance started to form? And if I understand you correctly, refertilize the labor movement along with several other.
Great question.
Okay, hold on, because we're gonna come back to it in a second. You're hearing Amy B. Dean. She is a labor consultant and an organizer, has represented unions all over the place, and not only has been in the trenches, but has spoken from the mountain. And we'll have more with her in just a moment on WCPT. I'm Turi Ryder for Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
I am in for Joan Esposito, and it's just about 18 minutes after 4 o'clock. Christmas Eve, if you're packing up that hot dish you're bringing to somebody's house for dinner, or doing some last-minute wrapping, or figuring out if you got everybody on your list taken care of, or just hiding things from the kids. I don't celebrate Christmas, but I used to love to go over my girlfriend's house and do the childcare so that she could bake. And I will tell you that the best wages, can I just tell you, and labor union, I love my union. I love my union benefits. I love my good wages. But, you know, if only SAG-AFTRA could figure out how to pay me in chocolate pecan pie, I think that might be the thing I'd negotiate hardest for. Amy B. Dean, welcome. You're on WCPT. I don't suppose there's anybody who has unlimited or even limited chocolate pecan homemade pie in their contract, but you've probably seen some interesting things go into those union contracts. We were talking about the formation of the alliance between blue collar, as it was called, and environmental workers, and the objectives and how those came together. Can you trace that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this was a really interesting moment in history, I think, that we are just now beginning to, I think, understand how it's playing out. You know, first, you have to go back to the very beginning of the moment before NAFTA. We were still negotiating all of our trade agreements, particularly the apparel and textile industries. You know, auto and steel and some of the more male-dominated industries had not been hit by imports to the same degree that more of the female-dominated industries like apparel and textile had been hit, where over 50% of the markets were offshored, and we were producing less than 50% in many cases domestically in America. You were going to ask me a question?
And you represented the needle trades right around that time, or earlier?
Yeah, so I went to work for the needle trades in the 1980s when I got out of college, and the majority of my peers were on their way to being future corporate structure of America. People were not looking to go to the labor movement. It was a very, I was not in the majority at that time. And we negotiated at the time in the middle 80s. Reagan was the president, and we were working on trade. The Ladies Garment Workers Union and the Amalgamated Textile Workers Union, that are now all folded up and buttoned up into Unite Here, no longer their own unions. We're working on really the last trade agreements in our country before the NAFTA and GATT regimes took over how we negotiate trade now today. Mm-hmm. And that was simply to say we want to hold on to at least 50% of our markets to be domestic. And what was interesting about that time was there was not a garment worker in America that couldn't have walked into, honest to God, a member of Congress's office and told you word for word what was in that trade agreement and why it was so important to them. At the time, I was working as the political and education director for the Garment Workers Union, covering the Midwest region located in Chicago and representing 5 states. And part of my job was to bring our members to talk to members of Congress about why it was so important to pass the Fair and Free Trade Agreement Act of 1985. And we were looking to override President Reagan's veto And we had bipartisan support across the country. We had Republicans.
What was in it? What was it? Well, yes, of course it would have Republicans because a lot of the mills and the factories were in those states.
South,
right. So what was in that agreement that you wanted?
What was in the agreement essentially said we only wish to share our markets with imports at least 50%. Let's hold on to at least 50% of our markets as domestic.
And was that because the writing was on the wall that you could make things overseas for so very much cheaper, or why were they willing?
The reason why were they willing to sign on to it?
Yeah, because that seems like they'd be giving a lot.
Yeah. The reason why Southern Republicans were able to sign on to it is they wanted to retain good-paying jobs in their district.
Oh, no. I had a different question. I'm sorry. I wasn't clear. It sounds from what you're describing that prior to the 80s, we still made most of what we wore here, if I understand it correctly. And what were the tells that were letting the union needle trades know that their time was limited? What was happening in the world that made them perceive that 50% would still be a good deal?
Oh, because we had already lost 50% of our markets by then.
Okay. And it was it wasn't going to China yet. Where was it going at that point?
No, we were losing to some of it was high wage markets. It weren't all low wage, low trade markets. We were losing some of our marketplaces, not just to low wage countries like China or Mexico, like people had thought, but we were also losing trades to high trade surplus countries like European countries, and so not just the story that we were losing to low wage.
Interesting. I didn't realize.
There are two reasons for it.
Yes.
Two things that people should know. One was you got to, under the Reagan administration, write off your tax bill, whatever the cost was for doing business elsewhere. So the more money you spent elsewhere, the more you wrote off your domestic tax bill. So that was a big loophole. So that was number one. And number two, the big myth that everybody thought was, well, if you went to a low-wage, low-trade surplus country, then it was a cheaper product for consumers. But what we were able to show in Congress is that whether the shirt was made in China or was made in, Tennessee, it was the same price when you went to Kohl's to purchase it. For Christmas for somebody.
So it wasn't really helping anybody but the factory owners to sell it somewhere else, to make it somewhere else.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the long and short about trade, and what's so significant about this is that there was never anything preordained about this. We incentivized this through tax policy. So the point I want to make here is that here's the interesting point. So at the time we were negotiating to hold on to our markets 50%, and we still bilaterally negotiated with all these countries one by one before NAFTA and GATT came in, which said we're going to do away with all that. We're going to have one overarching trade regime that negotiates overall. While we're doing that, and my job was to bring our members to convince their members of Congress to support the override of President Reagan's veto of the bill. In the middle of that, I was working with our members in the Midwest, and all the Midwest Democrats were absolutely in support of overriding the president's veto. But when I got to, and so in the middle of this, I was asked by the union to go move to California. I was the political director in the Midwest. They asked me if I would come out and build a political education department on the West Coast. I said, okay, sounds fun. So I moved to San Francisco in the middle of the override bill, doing the same thing with our members on the West Coast. They were equally educated. Our members in the Midwest, they knew everything that was in this bill. We started a meeting with our Democratic members on the West Coast. Nancy Pelosi is probably the most famous one, but there were many others. Dianne Feinstein was still a member of Congress back in those days. And all the Democrats on the West Coast were absolutely supporting the president's veto. They all came from districts that were heavily dependent on trade. They were port cities.
So the thinking was if they vetoed this, then more and more and more of the work would go overseas, which would be better for those shipping states that made a lot of money. And to circle back to what you said, if the unions that are mostly women working there go up against unions like the Teamsters and the longshoremen and the people who serve the import-export business, then of course you've chosen those unions over the unions that represent mostly women. Is that also so?
Exactly. And the tone was so different. And when you walk into these offices, I can remember the day, may her memory be for a blessing. However, I can remember Dianne Feinstein lecturing our members about what was in their best interest. And that was the day that I thought to myself, the Democratic Party is going to dig itself a hole in the ground.
And
I'll never forget Dianne Feinstein wagging her finger at our members, telling them what was in their best interest. And I thought, how arrogant to tell these people what's in their best interest when Dianne Feinstein has not a clue what's in the best interest of these folks. You know?
Yes.
And this whole
she was a big finger wagger anyway. Yeah. Well, we're gonna pick this up in a second. Hold that thought, because we're gonna pick that up in a second. I got finger wagging in my face on the air when NAFTA came up, and we're going to talk about that, the gendering of these unions and how people felt that they could just tell them what to do. And while we're on the subject, I'm going to ask you in a moment to tell this story that I'm the reason you're here. I met you at a dinner, and you told this great story about how you came to represent the needle trades in the way that made them proud to send you. So that's all coming up in just a moment. You're hearing Amy B. Dean, labor consultant and organizer with her own consulting practice. More stories of how labor has evolved and what's lying ahead in just a few moments on WCPT. We are Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, radio personality and author Turi Ryder.
Oh, sweet. 4:31. For Joan, I am Turi Ryder. You can find me on all the socials. Some of you already have. We're going to be right back into our conversation with Amy B. Dean, who is a fascinating raconteuse, I suppose you're supposed to say, and has so many years of experience in the labor movement about how we got where we are and where we're going. And she's also got a great story from her time in the needle trades, which I'm going to ask her to tell. If you have a thought about labor, where it's going, where it's been, what's doing right, what it has done wrong, please feel free to text me. We do that here, 773-763-9278. I'll try and get to all your texts as best I can. And I always love hearing from you when I'm in for Joan. Amy, so where we left off, yes. Dianne Feinstein wagged her finger at the needle trades people and said, you guys don't know what's good for you. I know what's good for you. You're not negotiating in your best interest, but I know better. So then what happened?
Well, we all left. We were pretty disappointed. Our heads were hanging low. And I remember for myself feeling, wow, how, I remember the big question for me was the longer-term relationship between labor and the Democratic Party, and this was the very beginning of asking ourselves, what would be our future?
Wow.
And at the time, this is the last thing I'll say about this, and we spend a lot of time on this piece, is you could see that there was a fissure in the labor movement. The growing part of the labor movement, the service employees, for the most part, the trade was not an issue for them. There's not anything to say that was right or wrong. It's just that that's the growth in the labor was not coming out of manufacturing. So on the one hand, we were seeing foreshadowing of a part of the Democratic Party that was going to abandon a part of the labor movement. At the same time, not any real repercussions from the overall labor movement because it was not something that impacted labor writ large.
Well, I think you've pretty much isolated it.
This is the moment.
This is where
the moment we were going to see a breakdown.
I can see that, and thank you for explaining it so well. So let's circle back a little bit, because I love the story of how you came to proudly represent the needle trades in Indiana. Would you just, I just loved how that happened. Would you talk about it?
Yeah, my first job out of school, I wanted to go work for the labor movement, and there's many, many reasons for it, that both personal, political, they have to do with family, faith, peoplehood. But I went to go work for the Garment Workers Union. It was one of the most proudest moments in my life. And I started out as an organizer, and I also used to get thrown in anytime someone needed a pinch hitter on something. And, when I was young, I used to think it was because I was important. But what I realized when I got older was because nobody cared.
Aww.
I was the low man on the totem pole.
Send Amy. She'll go.
Send Amy. I used to get called Golda by my vice president. Anyway, so I got sent into a shop. It was an unfortunate situation. I should not be laughing, but there's the business agent who represented the workers in this particular dress shop. Something unfortunate had happened to her, so I got sent in because there was a grievance that was I will not get into the details, but one of our members was in trouble. I went in to represent the member. It was not my shop. I was not representing the incumbents or representing members at the time. I was an organizer. And I went in to represent the member and against the boss, went in, took the boss on, dealt with the issue that was in violation of the contract. After all was done and said, it was a victory for us as a union. But a few of the shop floor stewards took me out to the back and warned me that I should never, ever come to their shop looking the way I looked. And I just had a T-shirt and ripped up blue jeans on, and I was an organizer. And I was given a lecture about how a union rep should look and appear and present themselves when they come into these women's dress shop.
Fair point.
Fair. Like the boss, if not be better looking than the boss.
Uh-huh.
And my youthful revolutionary outlook on what the labor movement was about was shattered.
Yeah, they didn't really care about the content. They cared about the package, too.
They cared about that. Not only should I be better than the boss, I should look better than the boss. And this was a very important lesson. And to this day, they handed me 2 packages, long boxes of a lime green and a brown polyester pantsuit.
Very chic in those days.
I got fur on the back of my neck went up, and I got sweaty palms, and I felt nervous, and I said, I can't take this from you because legally it's true. You cannot take a gift as a union representative from a member or from the boss. Either. You can't take anything. So legally I was covered. But you'll note that over the 90s, early aughts, I had many, many articles written about me in the work that our team did in California. And there would always be comments about how I was dressed. And I dressed really well. And then Steve Greenhouse did an article about me in the New York Times many years ago and talked about how well I dressed.
You do, by the way. I've met Amy. She is a very fashionable lady. She is. So you learned that in Indiana, and you didn't have to wear the leisure suit.
That or a lime green or brown polyester pantsuit, so I learned how to dress myself.
I think that's important. That's important.
I'll make one point. Let me make one point about this. When I think today about who we send into the South when we're organizing, warehouses, we're organizing car factories, I think to myself, we do not need to send in people who are there to, build the socialist revolution. That's not what workers are looking for.
Yeah, I remember having a conversation when the ERA was up in Illinois. I was at, of all places, the Michigan Women's Music Festival, and he was the only person there wearing clothing. And I sat through an organizing meeting on the ERA, and most of the women there whether they had clothes on or not, it was pretty clear that if they walked into places where the women they wanted to help by passing the ERA fair wages and a level playing field would take a look at them, they would be scared to pieces. These women had, shaved heads or crew cuts and lots of piercings and lots of tattoos. And I'm listening to them talk about and they had just thrown pig's blood on the downstate Illinois legislators, whereas Phyllis Schlafly had baked them pies. And I'm listening to this and I put my little hand up and I said, I think if you really want to help, I'm from Kansas. And if you really want to talk to the person working in the office who's not being paid what her coworker male is being paid, come in costume. Don't make your wardrobe a barrier to what you have to say, which is the flip side of what you're just saying. Just don the outfit so that that's not an impediment. So let's go to now. Labor has dug itself into a hole. They've passed NAFTA. Now it's hitting the guys. What happens now?
I think this point that you make about how we show up in the world without being overwhelmingly oppressive and prescriptive is an important point. And it brings us back, fast forward to the moment that we're in and how we choose to make meaning of what happened in this last election. Now, obviously, it's, everybody has their own take, and there's been already millions of pundits who've explained to us and offered explanation into why we're in the moment that we're in. But I think we should be really careful. I think we should be really careful. First thing we should do is listen more than we speak. And second, before we talk about all the misogyny and sexism and racism and all the things that are out there in the world, which there are certainly no doubts, we have to take this in measure and be careful of the meaning we make. At the same time that we say we lost this race because of racism and sexism, we have to remember that, two African-American women, for the first time in the history of America, are serving in the Senate.
Yeah, I don't buy that as the explanation, by the way. I don't think that's the reason that we lost.
And I just want to be careful about it because, to foment so much hatred to the other extent is just as damaging to people's souls. And I don't say this to be an apologist. I say it because the damage that it has on the souls of people. We had two amazing women that won the Senate, and the thing that's crazy about this is that if you look at Angela Brook and Lisa Blunt in Delaware, Maryland, not only did they run ahead of the head of the ticket in this election cycle, but before they came in, we've only had two African-American women that ever served in the Senate at the same time. We had Carol Moseley Brown in 92, and then not until Kamala Harris comes all these years later do we have a second black woman in the Senate. We have two that won an election in a year where the head of the ticket lost. The reason I bring that up is because, if the only tale we tell is one of demoralization, that's not right either. So somewhere we have to have the right balance in how we tell the stories. About what's happening in the world.
Well, let's circle
talking about ourselves too much is a little bit. We have to be careful about.
Well, let's circle to your union point. A lot of pundits with whom I do agree have basically said that working people felt just as you indicated, you saw the tea leaves early. Working people felt that the Democratic Party had left their interests behind. And how does that square with the fact that unions are popular now? We have a president who is demonstrably anti-union, lauded Elon Musk for firing, they weren't union employees, but for firing workers. How do we square that with this idea that people, blue-collar workers, people who were represented by unions, voted in majority for that guy? How did that happen?
Because they didn't vote for him. The vote wasn't for Donald Trump. The vote was against the current the current moment. People voted against the status quo. It wasn't a vote for the current moment. They voted against the status quo. They voted against. It was an anti-establishment vote, and they weren't voting for a candidacy that was anti-change. It was impossible for a candidate who was representing the establishment and didn't have anything to say that was against the current status quo, and at the same time adopt that candidate as an anti-change candidate. That's just cognitive dissonance. You can't vote for somebody who's trying to advocate a position of change that says at this very same moment, there's nothing I would do different from the current moment, and at the same time, I'm here for change.
Yeah, that was a hard one to hear. So unions are back.
It makes no sense. There's no logical sense.
Unions are back in favor, as you've pointed out. And people, well, this is my conversation with people with whom I disagree when I explain why I have so many friends who vote differently than I do. I think everybody has their reasons. They're not crazy. They have their reasons. I may think that their reasons are not based on facts or based on, in fact, falsehoods, but they have reasons. So if unions are back, and we just drove past a whole bunch of Starbucks workers picketing the other day, and the auto workers did well in many cases, what's the future here? If people want to blow up their institutions and at the same time restore one of the great institutions of America, which is organized labor, how does that get sorted out?
Yeah, so here's what my take is for organized labor. When I entered the labor movement in the 80s, again, was not a popular time, was interesting for me because both the issues that were immediately in front of us were both trade and immigration. I won't go back and talk about all of that, but those were the two issues that were most important at the time. And, today we see ourselves in a situation where, we are this is a really interesting time where all of a sudden we see a young generation that both is ahistorical primarily, doesn't know the real history of the labor movement or some of the darker sides of the labor movement. So it doesn't associate the labor movement with its racist history, which when I was coming up in the labor movement, and we were trying to get community members to be in alliance with us or be in a relationship with us, we had to overcome that. Because the generation that we were trying to be in a relationship with in the community remembered historical periods of labor movement where it was less than flattering. For the most part, some of the generation that is coming to age now doesn't have that same historical knowing or understanding or history.
Well,
and so they see the labor movement.
I know that there are people who are unaware, for example, that with the GI Bill, as a person of color, if you were white, you could use the GI Bill to study for a trade, but the trades weren't admitting black and brown people, so you couldn't use your GI Bill to become a high-paying tradesperson in a union job. So I think a lot of people don't even know that was the case at that point.
This generation has no history of that. That's exactly right. Exactly right. So now you've got the generation that doesn't know the history and only sees what is the result of a sea change that really was planted. The seeds were planted in the early 90s, coming off of NAFTA, where environmentalists and labor people and the broader community began to create organizations in their communities across the country, local organizations working on economic justice issues like living wage and community benefits and public affordable housing, all sorts of things that are happening at the local level, putting economic justice on the front burner in communities across the country. And these organizations have resulted in major political victories at the regional level, state level, progressive governors. People are in office and are governing from a progressive agenda. And so this in many ways has brought a resurgence to the labor movement and has brought forward a movement that is attractive. The question now for labor and what animates me, and I've never been and so the timing is off now. This is what I think is most important. What kind of, at the time of the 90s, the question that animated, I think, many of us was, if the labor movement is going to be reversing its fortunes and become an institution that's attractive, it has to be as much a community-based organization as it is a workplace-based one.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that? Explain some more about that.
We built these think act tanks in our communities that were working on these economic justice issues in our regions in alliance with environmentalists and other kinds of community organizations on issues of living wage and community benefits and public housing and all sorts of progressive governance issues across the country. And you can see these in these 501c3 organizations all across the country. Now you have more progressive labor justice organizing going on at the communal level, city, regional, state level across the country. The real question now for the labor movement is what kind of workplace-based institution is it going to be? That's the issue, and that's the question. Because the labor movement today in the workplace, very limited capacity is it really up to doing, I think, the job that today's workers want it to perform. And here's what I mean by that. The original labor movement invested time in negotiating quality of life for workers, wages, benefits, and we say working conditions, but that's really the last part of the labor movement that really hasn't matured over the years. We say wages, hours, and working conditions, but working conditions is very narrowly defined. That's where the employer class has really fought the labor movement and said, we're not giving up anything under here.
Let's pause there, because one of the big issues around which workers have organized is their scheduling, is having their schedule made more reliable so that they can engineer the rest of their lives with some kind of accuracy, and they can manage childcare, and they can manage travel, and they can manage all the things you have to manage and can't manage if your boss can schedule you 12 hours ahead of time to work a shift you normally never work. Is that what you're talking about when you say workplace, quality of life?
That's a piece of workplace conditions, sure.
What else?
And that's important.
What else?
Important. I'm talking more about workers who work in industries like healthcare and transportation and education and the public sector more broadly, where workers are not at the table when it comes to important issues around governance, how public resources are being spent, how just transitions are taking place given the role of climate change and how that's impacting decision-making at the highest levels of institutions, workers not being at the table when it comes to safety and how safety protocols are being made or not being made within workplaces, workers being at the table when decisions are being made about on what basis do people move from first-level supervisors to managers. There's so much. The role of management is so important in the workplace that it's too important to be left to managers.
So you're suggesting that labor take more of a managerial role in partnership, or you want people promoted to management from the ranks of labor because they'll be sympathetic, or what specifically are you hoping will happen?
I think labor has to be able to do more than simply grieve over and over the same grievances in the workplace. Labor has to be in a role where it's in a position to be able to solve problems within the workplace.
As you're saying this, I can think of a couple of examples, just like Boeing stopped being run by people who came out of engineering and had worked in that area of their company. And so people would point out that there was a safety problem, and people who knew what that really meant weren't in power positions. Is that the kind of thing you're discussing?
Yeah, and are ignored over and over and over again.
What about, I just have to ask you, we have a couple minutes left, but I just heard this story. I'm sure you've seen the, I want to say her last name is Twilly from the New York Times, who wrote this piece about how an actress had grieved inappropriate conduct on the set, and she thought she'd resolved it. And the management of her movie came to sabotage her on social media. They did all the things she wanted. They sent an intimacy coach onto the set. They had a whole process. The union has a process. And so they hired somebody to smear her, apparently, according to the New York Times piece, on public media. Is that the kind of thing where, I mean, I know my union best. We have a policy when you're not safe on the set, when you are being molested or threatened or something's wrong, there's a policy. You can implement it. But with social media, management has many more tools at its disposal to undo the good that the labor union did. What was your take, if you're familiar with that story? What was your thought about that?
I think the way in which we set up the grievance procedure for resolving conflict in workplaces is inherently it builds toxicity in the system long term. And while it may solve an immediate grievance, it plant seeds for long-term conflict as opposed to resolving problems long-term. And everything we know about how human beings resolve disputes doesn't get integrated into how we resolve conflict in our workplaces in the union grievance procedure.
So
it's almost like the whole thing has to be retooled.
You know, that
if the minute I have a conflict with you, the first thing that happens is we have to stop talking to each other. We get sent to our rooms and we can't talk, and all of a sudden legal processes begin, and no one is in direct communication with each other. And it becomes a legal process, and we litigate. That's not problem solving.
Yeah, I think that's so, but that's internal work. I'm not sure. Well, it comes down to the same thing. If you can have a contract, but it's really only as good as the people who make it. If they don't have good intentions, if they're not, if they're nudging and winking at their fellows on their side of the fence that, we can sign this thing, but we don't have to really live up to it, then you're kind of screwed on both sides. So,
you can also look to, let me just also give a shout out for the healthcare industry with the Kaiser unions in California and in part of the East Coast, the coalition of Kaiser unions that are doing a completely different role of how labor and management work together over conflict. And it's a sea change. They resolve conflict. They don't file grievances.
How are they doing it?
They solve problems permanently. It's the largest and most successful long-term labor management partnership in the history of North America. It's not perfect.
Yeah.
But it's way better than half of what we see going on in other workplaces where unions are filing the same grievance over and over and over again, and they're draining the treasuries of their members' resources that could be being used to build public housing for their seniors, affordable housing for their senior members. So much of those resources could be going for so many more creative uses for their membership than to constantly be going to lawyers to file grievances for the same 5 things over and over and over again.
All right. Well, we're going to leave it there because we're going to talk about that progress if you're kind enough to come back another time. But I think you've sort of set the...
I'm sorry I was so long-winded.
No, I love it.
Technical questions, but it was delightful to be here, and wish everybody happy, safe holidays.
Thank you. And it was Megan Tui and the actress is Blake Lively. It came back to me there in a moment. Thank you, Amy B. Dean, for being on the show today and for giving some hope, I think, for workers going forward. And you, too, have a happy holiday. That's Amy B. Dean. She is, as you've heard, a long-practiced expert in the labor field. Coming up, a woman who works very hard. For sure, she could have had tonight off, but she's not. Patty Vasquez is going to drive you home, and you'll hear some of your favorite hosts tomorrow in their best of moments. Enjoy your holiday. Merry Christmas if you're celebrating. Happy Hanukkah. I'll be here Thursday on WCPT. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Julia. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Matt. Thank you.